Welcome to 5460, the Joe West podcast. Featuring former Major League Baseball umpire Joe West. For 6 decades, no one has seen more baseball than Joe West. And now he shares those stories with you every week right here on the Podcast Heat Network.
Joe West is asking the Reds to leave the field. I guess maybe as a form of security.
Well, Joe West is not going back behind the catcher. So what is he doing? He wants to throw him out or what?
He's not going to back away from confrontation. It's just not in his makeup.
Which guy are we talking about backing away?
Well, come to think of it, hey, it's both guys.
And they're warning the Atlanta dugout now. A helmet came flying out. Bobby Cox, I don't think threw the helmet. One of his players did, but Bobby's jawing back at Joe West. But somebody's been tossed, and here comes Cox. It was Bobby Cox who threw the helmet out there.
Off the umpire, and that's a foul ball. Joe West gets drilled, and he appears none the worse for it. He's a strong man.
Nice. Now Joe's going to give him some argument because Mark's saying, "Why do you do?" Joe, just get over there and umpire, will you? Yeah. Just get over there and umpire. No. That's all.
It's 5460, the Joe West podcast. Here's Joe West and your host, Mike Claiborne.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of 5460. It's the Joe West podcast. I'm Mike Claiborne, and our special guest today, another Joe. He's Joe Buck of ESPN, and we are glad to have him to be part of what we do with the podcast. Joe, first of all, thank you for joining us today, and congratulations on your new gig.
Yeah, it still sounds weird to hear you say Joe Buck of ESPN. I mean, I've been at Fox since I was 24 years old. That's when I got hired, and 27 years later, I make the jump. But I'm excited about it, and I'm excited to see your faces, see you, Mike, who I've known forever, and to see Joe, who not only did I know, but my dad knew well over the years. So good to be on with you guys.
Well,
So,
it is interesting that you are going to go with ESPN because you were there with Fox from the beginning.
Yeah.
You started with them when they started. So
yeah,
you
in
were
'94. Yeah, when in '94, Joe, we always joked. I think it was John Madden who came up with it. He said, they call this Fox Sports. It should be called Fox Sport. We had football, and that was it. And I remember Mike Claiborne when I was sitting at KMOX one day, and I was doing an open line show, and news came down that Fox had gotten the rights to cover the NFC and the NFL, and CBS was out. I was, throwing stuff around the room. Like, you got to be kidding me. This is the end of football as we know it. And it was the end of my life as I knew it. And something new, a new chapter was about to begin. So I had no idea when that came along that I'd be a part of it. And I sure as heck had no idea that once the season ended last year, that I would be changing addresses. I'm excited about it. I mean, I don't want to mislead. I can't tell you how excited I am to start something new, but it's an odd feeling after almost 30 years at one place.
And for you, I would think that everything kind of happened like overnight, it seemed like, because normally those sort of things kind of drag on. You were still basically under contract. But were you as surprised at how quickly things unfolded for you moving from one place to another?
Yeah, on one hand, and on the other, I had to kind of make things happen quickly. There was somebody else that wanted that gig, and his name rhymes with Cal Schmeichels. And so I had to get to work. And if I didn't get out of my Fox deal, it would have been Troy and Al at ESPN, which would have been a great combo too. So I knew the clock was ticking, and I had to go to work and basically lean on the people that I worked for almost 30 years to let me out a year early. I had told him for years that I was moving on from baseball after this season that we're currently in right now, which was the last year of my deal. And I think they knew that I was ready for a change. This is the first year since I was 18 years old that I haven't called or won't call a baseball game, and I'm 53. So, it's been a long go, and I think change is good. It's weird, but it's good. And I think they recognize that. It's not only good for me, I think it's good for them, and it's good to get another voice in there, and it's good for them to get new people and see how that goes. So I'm excited, and I'm sure they're excited too.
Well, I think you're being very humble there to say get new people because, let's just say it like it is. At age 25, you became the youngest guy to announce the regular slate of national football games. You started when you were young. You worked Major League Baseball with Tim McCarver, who had worked with your dad too.
Yeah.
And I think I think you've had a marvelous career, and I'm proud to say that you're a friend. So I'm tickled to death for you.
Well, thank you. I think you have to go about this stuff the right way. And, the last person I talked to before I was 100% sure that I wanted to leave was David Hill, who was the original guy that hired me at Fox. And he said that the 10 years after he left Fox that he's currently in the middle of right now have been the most rewarding 10 years of his life, and both professionally and personally. And he said, you got to go, you got to change things up, and you're going to be nervous before you walk into that booth for the first time. And when Monday Night Football, that theme song hits, I'm sure the butterflies will be bouncing around, but that's all good. That's good stuff. So I think when you feel like you're just doing it over and over and over again, you get, I'm not saying you get lazy, because the general population and Twitter will let you know if you're getting lazy. But it's time for a different look at things. And I've got little boys now. I've got daughters that are in their 20s, boys that are 4. And so I want to be around, and I want to be here. And I feel like I've done as much traveling as I can do, especially during the month of October. And it's time for something different that month too.
Hey, Joe, for you, you mentioned your dad and his relationship with umpires. Talk a little bit about that, because he really enjoyed being around umpires, and he could tell jokes and have as much fun with anybody when it came to them. What about you and your relationship, and how do you and Joe connect?
Well, I connect basically through my dad. I have to plead guilty to letting relationships kind of go on that front. And that is probably me being lazy and being jammed up before I go do a game and feeling like, when I walk into a football game, all my research is done. I'm ready. If I could be airlifted into the stadium 5 minutes before the game starts, I'm ready. Like my homework is complete. In baseball, I get there 4 hours before the game when I'm doing a national broadcast. And then it's kind of like the clock is ticking and I've got to run up. You don't know what the lineups are going to be. So I have to run up, get everything down in my scorebook, get things the way I like it. And I let that part of my relationship with people in the game slip. And that's not good. I admired the way my dad treated the officials, not just in baseball, but in football as well. He was friends with all the officials he was doing Monday Night Football with. He was friends with Joe. I went into the umpire's dressing room when I was a kid and met, the best of the best, like Lee Wire, a guy that did it forever, and I bat-boyed for, and the biggest man with the squeakiest voice I ever heard in my life, and Dick Stello, and all these different guys that I got to know. Bruce Fremming, who's a dear friend, and I wish he would lose my number, because all he does is call me looking for tickets. So I trust me, I'm well aware that there's always been this other layer that I could have tapped into better. And I don't know, Joe, I think it's worth talking about from your perspective. I feel like when I'm doing a game, everybody with a phone, a smartphone, or social media is telling me how bad I am. And eventually, you get tired of it. So I don't go there and I don't look for it. And I'm sure for you guys, especially when you're behind the plate, you have to feel like announcers, broadcasters are constantly second guessing and constantly grading your work. And that's got to get tiring. I don't care who you are, especially with these big games. I know it comes with the territory, but I would imagine you get tired of the guy sitting up there with a headset saying, that ball's outside and it's called a strike, or they haven't gotten that strike all night, or whatever it might be. So I kind of stayed away from a lot of that stuff. And maybe that's because I was scared to go down in there as a broadcaster. But I wish I had done better with that. Trust me.
Well, the unique thing about that is you have a job to do, and we have a job to do. And the umpire's trying to do the best he can, and you're trying to do the best you can. And you have to tell what you see because that's your job. Right. So for anybody to hold that against somebody, that's wrong. I mean, one of the biggest blow-ups I ever had with the White Sox was with Hawk Harrelson. And he called me every name in the book. He said, you should retire, you should do this. And when they showed the balks that I called, they were balks.
Right,
so
right.
What are you going to do? There's nothing you can do about that. But Hawk's favorite pitcher was the guy I called the balks on. So he went off at a time. And today, Hawk and I, if we're around, we're like best of friends. But
right.
That's part of the game. And early in my career, you probably met Al Barley.
Well, yeah, sure.
Did you meet Al?
Yeah, but I think he had retired by then.
Yes, yeah. When I met Al, he was retired. He was my supervisor when I came up, and he mentioned one day that this announcer didn't like me for some reason or another. And I said, well, what did I do to him? He said, you didn't do anything to it. You just keep doing your job. There's nothing you can do about that guy not liking you. And you actually realize that as an umpire, people are going to hate you just because you're an umpire. And in your situation, if you say something that they don't like about their favorite player, or maybe somebody that they know, then they're going to dislike you for you just telling your opinion.
Right. And no, you're exactly right. And there are a couple things to this. First of all, people always ask me, what did your dad tell you before you started in on this business? And the honest answer is he didn't really guide me very much. I think he knew that I paid enough attention as a kid in the seat down to the right of where the guys used to sit, and I would watch my dad as a little boy. When I was a little boy, when I would listen on a headset, I would watch him watch the game. I was watching the game. And that's how I learned how to broadcast. But he knew that I had paid enough attention, and I would do games into a tape recorder, and he and I would listen to the tape on the way home and blah, blah, blah. And that's how I kind of got started in all of this. He didn't tell me much. He told me two things going down to my first year at Louisville when I was 19 years old. He said, first of all, you've been watching big league baseball your whole life. Unless you feel like you could make that play 10 times out of 10, realize how hard it is for these guys to make. They're all trying, and you can't act as the broadcaster. Harry Carey was notoriously hard on certain players. As a broadcaster, you can't act like this guy's not trying hard, or this guy just blew it, or whatever. It's harder than it looks, especially from where we sit. And two, lay off the umpires. And I remember one time I was doing a game at Old Busch Stadium, and I was doing color, or I was doing play-by-play, and my dad was in the other seat. And I was starting to get frustrated with the strike zone of the umpire, because you're basically a homer when you do the games for a team, as opposed to the national guy. And I, that pitch looked like it was a strike, and it's called a ball or whatever. And I just remember my dad looking at me out of the corner of his eye. He didn't say anything, but he gave me this glare like, shut up. It's like, stop. And I stopped. And I think about that all the time when I'd be doing World Series games. I would almost picture my dad sitting in the seat next to me, looking at me like, really, you're going to go down this path? And it was a great lesson to learn. I was in the minor leagues one year. I think it was 1990. And I won't say the name of the umpire, but he was a guy that was going up and down at that point in his career. He'd do big league games. He'd come down to AAA games. And there was a play at second base. It was really glary at Old Redbird Stadium where the Louisville Redbirds used to play. And this umpire was looking out at a play in the left corner of the outfield. And the throw came in. our second baseman of Louisville caught it, tagged the guy before he got to the bag, and popped up and was looking at the runner at third, and the umpire just missed it. He didn't see the guy get tagged, and our second baseman was arguing with him, and I was on the microphone, and I said, I just don't think he saw, this guy's name was Craig Wilson, turn and tag the guy on the leg. I think he just missed it. And the next night, my broadcast partner and I got summoned down to the umpire's dressing room, and this guy came around the corner and undressed. He's like, "Which one of you is Joe?" And I was like, "Me?" I think I was 20. And he got in my face, and my broadcast partner, who was 15 years older than me and kind of like a second dad to me, actually got between us. And I wasn't fighting back. It just was really awkward. And that was another time to realize that there's a lot of pressure on every facet of this game and the people that work in every facet. And it made me choose my words, I think, better as time went on from that moment on. But I'll never forget, the guy said to me, "I'm going up to the major leagues tomorrow, and I'm working a series, and your ass is going to be sitting here in Louisville for the rest of your life. You'll never get to the big leagues," and blah, 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 blah. And I had already done some big league games that year, and I just shut my mouth and let him go off on me. But you know this person really well, Joe. I'll just leave it at that.
Rhymes with what?
You know what? I think the
Spark Kirschbach.
Okay, I got you.
I think you made a great point here that you did pay your dues by coming through the minor leagues. And I can remember when a statement like that was made in one of my first spring training games when I was coming up and down. And Chuck Tanner, I kicked Chuck Tanner out of a game in spring training. and Chuck was kind of different. He would pick on every young umpire to see how much they would take, to see how far he could go with it.
Yeah.
And he did that with every young umpire that came up. It didn't matter if your call was right or wrong. It didn't matter. But he started yelling at me one day, and like you said, you knew Al Barley. And Tanner, after I kicked him out, said, "You'll never see the big leagues making calls like that." And the next thing I hear is Al Barlick. He's got his hands through the screen behind home plate, and he said, "This kid will be here when you die."
Oh, my God.
And so you go through these growing pains, I like to call them, because you're going to have stuff in your career, in my career, where people just don't like what you did.
Yeah.
And you can't try to befriend everybody,
Doesn't work. It doesn't work. And, I think, when you say going through the minor leagues, and I did 2 years there, it was a great place, Louisville. I mean, it was a great city to be in the minor leagues. But I do think that's when my dad knew that I was serious about it. I think it's one thing to be Jack Buck's kid, sit in an empty booth, do the games into a tape recorder, get called on the air when I was 16 one time, and then when I was 18 one time, and did an inning, and that's all cute. But when you go to the minor leagues and you spend 2 summers there while you're also going to college, when summer's not going, and I was also the traveling secretary, and I was handing out meal money and plane tickets to Leon Durham and Bob Tewksbury and a lot of veteran guys that were coming back. Terry Francona was on our team. A lot of veteran guys that were giving it one last go, and a lot of young guys that were coming up. And so I was doing 2 jobs, and I was 19 years old. And I think that's when he knew that I wasn't wasting my time, or at least I loved it enough that I wanted to go through all that as a kid so that I could kind of earn my way, in air quotes, to the big leagues. And I felt that way myself. It was like, man, I love this. I don't want a day off. I'd rather go to the ballpark than not. So that's kind of when I knew too that this is what I wanted to do pretty much for the rest of my professional life.
Joe Buck is our guest. 5460 podcast. It's the Joe West podcast. I'm Mike Claiborne along with Joe West. And hey, Joe, one of the things I want to go back to, this is a business, as you mentioned earlier, because of social media and everything else, people can kind of be misportrayed. And how many times have you had people confront you? And Joe West, this goes for you as well. People who will confront you because of what they heard you said, or what they thought you did, and it was the furthest from the truth.
Well, I mean, I can go one level past that. I've been ripped on social media, on Twitter, for a game that I wasn't even doing. So I mean, they'll tag me and it'll be like, Buck sucks. Look at this asses. He hates the Yankees, and this guy, this guy's always been against us. And then somebody else. It's just funny to sit back and watch. Somebody else will chime in and go, that's Kenny Albert. That's not Buck. So it's like there's nothing you can do. I mean, sometimes you're just screaming out there like a crazy person if you start chasing all that stuff down. But yeah, I've many times. I try to be really clear with what I say. I remember Milt Thompson one time, who was a Cardinal for a long while. It was the only time I saw my dad get confronted by a player. And I really have never been called on the carpet, so to speak, for anything I've said on the air. But I remember my dad getting confronted by Milt Thompson. There was a ball that just got past Ozzie or just got into the outfield, and Milt Thompson was playing left, and a guy scored from second. And I think my dad's comment was, if you're not going to throw out a guy from there, you're not going to throw out anybody. And that pissed off Milt Thompson. And the next day, Milt came up to my dad. My dad was apologetic. I think sometimes, especially more when you're the team announcer as opposed to the national guy, you get emotional and you get wrapped up, and you want to see the team do well. And your mood is determined by your team winning or losing that night. And there's a lot riding on it. So you tend to get a little hyper sometimes. Maybe you're tired, maybe you're, whatever. But I think, it's easier to stay away from a lot of that stuff when you do it nationally, because you're I don't know these guys anymore. For the longest time, I was friends with all these players. I was the same age as them when I started with the Cardinals, so I hung out with a lot of them, and I knew way too much about their lives. But now they're just kind of like helmets and hats running around down there. I don't really know a lot of those guys, so I haven't been yelled at in a long time.
My wife Rita, and you know Rita.
Yeah.
She'll come in after the game, after I've worked the game. She says, these people are yelling at the plate umpire and they think it's you. They're up in the stands yelling, Joe West sucks, and you're at second base. You hadn't had a call the whole game.
Right. Yeah. No, I know that happens, but that's kind of a badge of honor. They know your name. They don't know. They can't pronounce Iasonia. So they say Joe West, and it's easy. The worst thing is when your name is Buck, because it rhymes with a lot of bad things. So, West rhymes with best. I can think of 2 words that rhyme with Buck that aren't very good. So you got me beat in that category.
Yeah, I worked a spring training game one day, and Greg Bonet, you remember that name?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Greg's getting married to this school teacher, and she had never been to a big league game, and it's a spring training game. It's the Houston Astros and somebody, and they picked the guy off first base, and the first baseman completely missed the tag. He just didn't tag the guy, and I signaled safe, and the Astros started chirping, and I started across the field, and they stopped. And so we get in the car after the game, and we're going back to the hotel. And his future wife said, Joe, they knew your name. I can't wait till they know Greg's name.
Uh-huh.
And Greg wanted to crawl in a hole and die.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, I mean, he was, I'm sure, a kid, and yeah. Plus, it was Greg Bonet.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's that's it's got a little different sound to it than Joe West.
Hey, Joe, you mentioned this will be the first time since you were 18 years old that you're not going to do baseball. What do you think you'll miss, if anything?
Well, I find myself going to a lot more games on TV now that I'm not working it, which is odd. I don't know why. And I've found myself watching the Cardinal team a lot more than I have in years past. And I think I'm kind of rediscovering my roots, which are, kind of all Cardinals all the time. And I'm not saying I'm a crazy fan. I'm not, reading box scores every day, but I like the team. I like some members of this team that are exciting to watch. And so I've found myself searching for it more than I thought I would. But I think I'll miss any Game 7. I think I'll miss any time, you can basically take your hands off the handlebars and just let a Game 7 happen when you're broadcasting. I've had Game 7s with Pedro Martinez and Roger Clemens and different guys over the years that, these starting pitchers that seem to be dwindling by the day, that are the guys that you just lock in on and go, man, when this guy pitches, this is a distinct advantage for this team. So I think anytime, listening to a home crowd cheer after a strikeout and just feeling that thrill and that energy in the stadium, that's the stuff I'll miss. A 9-8 game, or even worse, a 9-1 game in the middle of June when it's 104 degrees and you got 6 people in the seats. I don't think I'm going to miss those moments too much, but any Game 7, anything where there's something on the line and one team wins and one team goes home after all that work they've put in, I just don't think there's anything better. It's still a grand game, and I think it's got to be tweaked going forward. That's not news, but I still will miss that exhilaration of being in the booth and watching a team, the Cubs win their first World Series for the first time in 108 years, the Red Sox winning their first World Series for the first time in 86 years, the Yankees return to glory, all these different storylines I got to follow and call them winning the World Series. I'll miss putting that stamp on the end of a World Series.
All right, I'm going to make you guys co-commissioners for a day because you guys have some interesting observations on making the game more fun and entertaining and better. So, Joe, Buck, I'll start with you on maybe 3 things. If you're commissioner, you can change.
Well,
or you would adjust.
One thing I wouldn't change, and I'm anti, is the robo-ump thing. I don't know how Joe feels about that. I just think that's taking so much of the human element out of it. I don't like the thought of that. I would definitely ban the shift. I never thought I would say that 3 or 4 years ago because I thought hitters would adjust, and they just haven't. So, there's so little action in the game right now that every left-handed batter is trying to launch. I think it's ruined a lot of guys' swings and has made them less of a hitter when it's all launch angle and trying to hit the ball out of the park instead of, find a hole between 18 guys over on the right side of the infield. So I think you have to ban the shift. And I'm for the pitch clock. I think, it's too slow. Major League Baseball, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, and the last thing I want to do is have this like my whole life professionally and then be out of it and go, well, here's what I would do. But you asked, so I'll tell you, I just think they're more concerned about the overall time of game instead of a lack of action. If the game lasts 3:08, nobody cares if it's an exciting game. Football games last 3:08. Basketball games, I think, last longer. Hockey games last. That's not the problem. The problem is once the inning starts, there's not enough action, and that's where I think you need to ban the shift. I want to see more running. I want to see more situational hitting, and I want to see these guys get the ball and get it back to the plate, and let's go.
Well, you grew up in St. Louis, and one of the funniest lines I ever heard was Joaquin Andujar said about Whitey Herzog. He said, anybody can make up that lineup. He's got 8 leadoff hitters and Jack Clark.
Yeah.
So they were exciting teams to watch. And you do make a valid point about the shift, but there is a problem with the shift. They're not teaching guys how to hit today. And I actually talked to Paul Beeson one time, and I said, when was the last time you saw a baseball player play pepper? And
yeah.
he said, never. I said, well, that's playing pepper. We taught the guy how to control the bat, handle the bat and everything. And they asked Rod Carew one day, he said, what would you hit against the shift? He said 900.
Yeah. How about Gwynn?
Tony Gwynn, the same way, and so that's part of the players' fault that they're not adjusting that. I remember when Bernie Carbo got traded from Cincinnati to Boston, and he learned to hit the ball the other way because of the short left field fence. And I watched films of Hank Aaron, God rest his soul. When he played, he hit just as many home runs to right center field as he did to left center field. He hit the ball where it was pitched. So you couldn't put a shift on Hank Aaron. He's one of the greatest hitters that ever played. The one thing, and I've said this before to Mike, that I would change is I'd get rid of the DH. I wouldn't have it in either league because I think the DH slows down the game, and that's what they're trying to do is speed up the game.
Right.
And the thing about the DH is Ron Fairley said this to Joe Morgan when they put it in. He said, all it does is give the pitcher carte blanche to throw it whoever they want to because they don't have to bat. And the other thing is they pitch different. If Tom Seaver threw more than 9 pitches to the 7th, 8th, and 9th hitters, one of those guys fouled off a 2-strike pitch because the National League guys would go right after the 7th, 8th, and 9th hitter. The American League guys didn't do that because the DH was there instead of the pitcher. So that would be the one thing I would change. And I'd get big pushback from that. In fact, when I told Paul Beeston that, he said, how would you get the DH away from the players? I said, give them 2 more roster spots.
Yeah.
And he said, well, that's a good idea. But how do you, I said, the 2 roster spots got to be cheaper than the DH.
Yeah, no kidding. And then you think about it, and I worked with John Smoltz for 6 years. It drove him crazy. You don't have to go back that far to look at how exciting postseason matchups were based on the pitching matchups. And you could see how they would line up. Now, you saw it with Max Scherzer last year. It's hey, well, Max Scherzer pitched game 1 and 3, and now we need somebody to get the last 3 outs in game 5. We'll just run him. We'll just run Max Scherzer out there. And then all of a sudden he's got a dead arm. And they make guys, they treat all these guys as interchangeable. Even somebody like Max Scherzer, who I could make the argument nobody's given more return on a big money contract than Max Scherzer. He's the one guy that's been there every day. I don't know what they're trying to create because I've done World Series games. I did one last year where the game 2 starter or game 3 starter had never made a start in the big leagues and really was a reliever in the minor leagues, but they don't care about that stuff. So they've what bothers John about it, Smoltz, is those are high dollar positions. When you've got a workhorse that'll give you 220 innings, you got to pay that guy. And now there's really no those guys are being phased out. Now it's openers, and they can run in 5 guys that can throw 98 miles an hour, and they're all the same guy. And when those guys blow out, they'll bring up 5 more guys. And then, these guys have to be looking around like I wasn't developed. I never got a chance to see how good I could have been because it was just blowing it out as hard as they could. And then when they're worn out, they go get a new crop of them. So I don't know. I hate being the get off my lawn guy, but I do think there's a lot of the nuance of the game that's been missing. And I think this Cardinal team, Mike, and you watch them every night, has a little bit more of that, a little throwback. They'll steal bases. They'll move guys over. They'll make a productive out that Tim McCarver used to talk about all the time. And now, they start these extra innings with a guy at second base. All that means is it's either a 2-run homer or the guy's stranded because they don't have the ability to get guys over and get them in. That should be a guaranteed run every time, and it just isn't.
Well, Joe, I think if it was added as a legitimate statistic where somebody can monetize it like an RBI or sacrifices or things like that, you would probably see it encourage more. But I think why the Cardinals stand out, and I would put Tampa Bay in that category, there's maybe a half dozen teams who actually understand the nuances of the game where they implement them with confidence. But the other thing is this. Defensively, they do all the things that saves runs in games. They throw to the right bases. They hit the cutoff man. They can turn the double play in awkward situations. I mean, when you have Goldschmidt and Arenado on the corners, you really are a much better team. But I think that they have done something that maybe once they become more successful, and this is a copycat sport, we'll start to see more teams emphasize it at lower levels in the minors because you can't learn this at the big league level and think you're going to succeed. You have to be in the minor leagues where they teach it every day, and at some point it'll come to fruition for you. And I'll give you a good example. Cardinals had a runner at first and runner at third, and Nolan Gorman, who's a rookie, on a double play ball ran through second base. So it appeared that he was running off the bag. So they had to make a decision because they didn't get to the bag in time. So they had to make a decision, and Arenado basically drew the play to him instead of the play at home. Cardinals ended up scoring another run out of it. Now, you don't see that every day, but it's one of the things they teach in the minors, and it's something that those little things are the things that may get you a run during the course of the season. That'll be the difference in a win or a loss.
Yeah, well, I mean, along the lines of what Joe said earlier, Joe Madden in his office, I don't know, 4 years ago, I said, how many times would, let's say, Max Muncy have to bunt to get you to stop shifting on him? And he said, bunt successfully. He said, I don't know, a dozen, which is not going to happen. So I'm doing one-run games in World Series where a team's down and they have the shift on, and the idea of just pushing something just to get on base and get something going is the furthest thing from their mind. That guy's at the plate trying to tie the game with a home run, and it's just mind-blowing to me. But Madden said in his office, he said, I think the next iteration of this is going to be what Joe said about Joaquin Andujar. Anybody could make out that lineup. He said there's going to be 6 or 7 guys that can just flat out fly. They can run, make contact, and you're going to have a power guy in the 3 spot, maybe a power guy in the 4 spot, and that's it. And these players, the other teams won't know how to defend them because there's just too much action. The game right now just feels a little stagnant, on many occasions with some of the bigger teams.
There's I look back on everything that you and I have both done in the game, and you too, Mike. Every day in baseball, you're witnessing a piece of history. And you said something about the runner on second base if you go extra innings. How would Harvey Haddix have handled that when he had a perfect game for 14 innings? And now they're going to stick a guy on second base. That's just not right.
No.
I had Dwight Gooden and Nolan Ryan in a playoff game. They struck out everybody but the bat boys. And they both pitched 9 innings. Ryan pitched. I think Ryan pitched into the 10th, and they took Gooden out in the 9th for a pinch hitter.
And Gooden was a baby. Gooden was a kid. And I read that game, Joe, was on during the pandemic. And one of the best things, for me as a baseball fan was to turn on MLB Network and see a lot of those, for me, baseball in the 80s, the 70s, like that to me was great baseball. I wish I was old enough to have seen baseball in the 50s and 60s with a lot of the players that came and went during that stretch. But it was like, my God, this is baseball. It's Nolan Ryan and Doc Gooden, and they are going pitch for pitch. Nobody's blinking. They're striking out everybody, and it was thrilling. And I don't know, would people say that game's boring now because they're striking everybody out? I don't know. I would hope not, because to me it was fascinating. I couldn't stop watching it. And so the game has changed a lot. I'm not saying that's bad. It's just change is different. And, I think there are going to be some give backs here and trying to get a little bit more activity going as we go forward.
Well, a lot of it has to do with fundamentals. If the pitchers would throw strikes, you remember a pitcher named Randy Jones?
Mm-hmm. San Diego Padres.
Couldn't break a window pane. But if he threw 80 pitches, the game was over.
Yep.
I mean, Maddox, another one. Great pitcher, keeping the pitch count down, keeping his fielders ready behind him because he's going to get the ball and throw it. How about Jim Cott? Steve Carlton? Get the ball and get it up there. I remember Steve Carlton used to yell at McCarver. He'd yell at McCarver, don't say a word to the umpires. I'll pitch, you catch. The umpire just he'd yell.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and of course, none of us were there when Gibson and Koufax and them pitched, but they threw strikes.
Well, the games that we do, and I don't know, I did 24 World Series, so I guess that means I did 24 All-Star games. The All-Star games were the fastest moving games we did every year because nobody wanted to strike out. So guys would go up there ready to hit. They would go up there And they're facing all-star pitching on the other side, but nobody wants to strike out, so they go up there ready to swing. And it's the most fast-paced game we do, with the most substitutions and player changes, and who's hitting where, and you barely have any time to think when you're doing a game like that because guys are coming and going. But I'll tell you, as far as the pace of the game, because guys don't want to strike out, it's night and day. And it just proves that there's a mentality there that could be there. They have it, but I think in the regular season, it's just kind of, let's wait around. Let's work the pitcher. Let's get the pitch count up. Let's foul off a couple of pitches. And then, by the time action happens, it's been a while.
Yeah, but if you try to go deep in the count with somebody like Tom Seaver, after 3 pitches, you're in the dugout.
Right, yeah.
And I can remember the Big Red Machine, because I was just coming up then. I mean, they didn't work the pitcher. If they threw the ball near the plate, those guys hit it. I mean,
right.
And they may be the best 8 players I've ever seen.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
It's just an unbelievable team. I mean, you got 3 of them in the Hall of Fame already, and there's probably going to be a couple more before it's over. But it's amazing that they don't play the game the same way. I told this story the other day about when Eduardo Perez was on with us. I told him what Rod Carew said when he was the honorary captain for the American League All-Stars. They asked him, one of the kids, Dustin Pedroia, asked him, said, "What's your favorite song?" And he goes, "My favorite song?" He said, "Yeah, what's your music? What's your favorite song?" He said, "The national anthem." Of course, Pedroia said, "Well, why is it the national anthem?" He said, "Because I knew when I heard it, I was going to get 2 hits."
At least.
Hey, Joe, you've done so many games. You mentioned the All-Star games in the World Series. Who's the best player you ever called?
Jeter. I think Jeter was for handling all that he handled in New York. Joe Torre would tell you that locker room, that clubhouse ran itself. He didn't have to do much. He just was a born leader, and somebody that I don't know what his analytics were by the end of his career or the back end of his career, but if the bases were loaded and his team was winning by 1 run, he wanted the ball hit to him. And I those guys, you could look at it a lot of different ways. I mean, Trout, I didn't see him enough. Ohtani blew me away when I met him at the All-Star game last year. I mean, he's shockingly big and impressive. Pujols is everything you want in a player. But as far as big game, clutch moments, it would probably be him. And that made me think of David Ortiz at the plate. I think he was one of the most clutch hitters I ever covered when I was doing national games.
What about on the mound?
I mean, I could watch Maddox pitch Maddox or Pedro are the 2 guys that I would pay to see. And they did it so differently, Maddox with the arms going up on a tailing fastball to a left-handed hitter, and just it was mastery. And he grew up in Vegas and took a lot of his card playing mentality out to the mound with him. He just outthought whoever was at the plate. He was that much. He's like a baseball savant, and Pedro was just electric. So watching him strike out, I think the first 5 or the first 6, whatever it was, in the All-Star game at Fenway Park, after Ted Williams came out and raised his cap to the crowd, one of the greatest hours of my life. It was unbelievable. But those are the 2 that jump to mind. There are many others, but I think those are the 2 that stand out.
All right. Well, when do you clock in for football?
I mean, I'm embarrassed to say not until August 18th. I think I have a preseason game. So between now and then, I'm going to be raising 4-year-olds, arguing with my wife, and trying to play golf.
Which one do you think you'll succeed in?
I'll lose every argument. I'm going to give it my damnedest with the boys, and my golf game stinks right now. So I'll say the boys, because golf's not good right now, and my wife wins every argument.
Happy wife, happy life.
Yes. Oh, yeah.
You know that drill.
That's unique because you announced with a lot of other famous announcers in football as well as in baseball. I mean, so you had all these years that you've been working in football. Which venue did you like there?
Well, I would say that Lambeau Field is still really cool. It's not what it was when it opened, I guess, in the 50s. They've added so much to it, but to walk into that stadium before, 4 hours before the game and to see it empty and it's freezing and to see the bleachers out there before you're about to do an NFL game is such an odd sensation. It still gets me every time. So Lambeau Field is a special place. It was like calling baseball games at Old Yankee Stadium. Like everybody always says, what's your favorite baseball stadium? And my answer is Old Yankee Stadium. I mean, even more so than Fenway, more so than Wrigley, just because of the history that was there and where it sits and, just the World Series that have been won there and what have you. But I think football wise, these stadiums now, Joe, in the NFL are so good that you really can't find a clunker. There are a couple of them, but they're all unique in their own way. The new one in LA is sensational. But I would say as far as nostalgia and having that feel like, wow, this is really cool. It's Lambeau Field.
Hey, I don't want to put you to work too soon because you'll get the phone call, I'm sure, after we finish this conversation. What's the one sport that you either would like to do or wouldn't mind doing more of?
Well, I did college basketball as a kid, and I miss doing that. I miss being on the floor. I think that's what I like most about it is that you're down there and you're that close to the action. I've called baseball games down behind home plate, and that's not so easy. And another good reminder is how fast things are moving down there as opposed to being removed and up in the press box. But I think basketball would be something I'd love to do again at some point. I don't follow the NBA. I don't know if that's because I'm St. Louisan and I missed that here, but college basketball was so fun to do, to be in a college arena and to see a team go end to end. I loved it. Hockey, I'd love to do it, but I know I'm not smart enough to do it. My mouth and my mind don't work that fast, so I'll just leave that to the professionals. But I would say basketball.
Expect the invitations anytime now, I'm sure. Trust me.
Yeah.
You'll be East Toenail State Wesleyan doing the game now.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I don't want to do. So I'm good. I'm good right here in my basement doing podcasts and hiding from my kids.
There you go. Hey, Joe Buck, it's been a blast, man, to visit with you. Continued success. Best of luck with the new venture, and thanks for being part of the 5460, the Joe West podcast.
Oh, my God. I love it. Thank you, guys. Joe, it's great to see you. I'm sure I'll see you on a plane somewhere.
Absolutely.
In the not-too-distant future. And, Claibs, I'll see you around.
You got it, my friend.
All right, guys.
For Joe Buck and Joe West, I'm Mike Claiborne. We thank you for tuning in for another edition of 5460, the Joe West podcast.
My baby took me to the ballpark to see a baseball game. Lord, it had to be at least 99 in the shade. I was stealing a glance at some tight short pants just as I turned my head. My baby grabbed me by the arm and this is what she said. If you cheat on me, you'll be out at home. If I catch you playing the field, you're gonna be long gone. You better play it safe and don't do me wrong. 'Cause if you cheat on me, you'll be out at home.
You've been listening to 5460, the Joe West podcast, here on the Podcast Heat Network. Make sure to subscribe and don't miss an episode each and every Monday. We'll talk to you next week.
She's checking all the signs while I'm enjoying two of the great American pastimes. It's fouling up my nerve watching all these curves, remembering what she said to me. And if I get caught looking, it's gonna be strike three. If you cheat on me, you'll be out at home. If I catch you playing the field, you're gonna be long gone. You better play it safe and don't do me wrong. 'Cause if you cheat on me, well, you'll be out at home. If you cheat on me, you'll be out at home. If I catch you playing the field, you're gonna be long gone. You better play it safe and don't do me wrong. 'Cause if you cheat on me, well, you'll be out at home. If you cheat on me, you'll be out at home.